of serial killers, cannibals, rapists, and necrophilists. Robin Gecht was the leader of the group and enlisted 3 other associates to help him with the crimes: Edward Spreitzer and brothers Andrew and Thomas Kokoraleis. The cultist's first victim was 28-year-old Linda Sutton.
The 4-man satanic cult called the Ripper Crew planned and carried out brutal murders together in a very short amount of time. From spring 1981 to fall 1982, it is estimated that the gang tortured as many as 20 women before murdering them using blunt objects, hatchets, or other bladed weapons.
Just like the name Voldemort sent chills down the spine of wizards, so did the name Andrew Kokoraleis traumatize Americans that lived in Illinois in the 1990s. Andrew Kokoraleis was one of the most infamous criminals in Illinois history, known for his role in the brutal Ripper Crew murders. Ripper Crew was one of the most dangerous cult groups to ever exist because the crimes the members committed were not deemed to be fit for humans. They had no justifiable motivation for the horrendous crimes they committed, and at that time, the crew was tagged satanic. The Ripper Crew was made of 4 persons, 2 brothers, Andrew Kokoraleis and his brother Thomas Kokoraleis, the group leader, Robin Gecht, and then Edward Spreitzer. They were accused of the murder of 17 different women with adults, ranging from kidnapping to rape to mutilation and then murder of their victims. The thick of their operations were carried out between 1981 and 1982, with 18 casualties to their name, 17 of which were women. It appeared as if Andrew and his crew were intentionally targeting young women, with the youngest of their victims 18 years old. When the Ripper's crew capture a victim, they proceed to take turns raping the woman, mutilate the left breast, murder her, and then drop her body on the roadside. They were carrying out their operations with insane audacity that one would almost think they were careless, but they were still careful enough not to leave anything that could link them directly to the casualty, which made it even more difficult for the law enforcement officers to catch up with them. Every day was like success to Andrew and his crew, until they met their Waterloo on the 5th of November, 1982, when the group leader, Robin Gecht, was arrested, and he led the police to the rest of his teammates. Andrew started his journey in prison from that moment on the death row until the 17th of March, 1999. 17 years later, Andrew became the last person to be executed in Illinois before the state abolished the death penalty in 2011. It appears the number 17 had a significant impact on Andrew's lifetime, as he participated in the assault of 17 women, and he spent 17 years behind bars before he was finally executed. However, no humor can even be depicted from his life, for he was a man that constantly caused pain, suffering, and terror to others. His crimes, alongside 3 other men, left a lasting scar on the state. His final 24 hours serve as a haunting reminder of his violent past, the justice system's ultimate punishment, and the ongoing debate surrounding capital punishment. But before we get into his final hours, let's take a closer look into what the Ripper Crew was all about.
The cultist's first victim was 28-year-old Linda Sutton, a sex worker and mother of 2. They abducted Linda near Wrigley Field on May 23, 1981. The body was found 3 days later when police responded to the scene after someone called about a bad smell at a motel. Authorities initially believed that the smell was coming from a dead deer, but after searching the area, they found Linda's body in a field behind the motel. Her children were 9 and 1 years old at the time of her violent death. Linda had been brutally murdered. She had on a sweater but no pants. Her underwear was down around her thighs with $17 tucked into her socks. She had been handcuffed, stabbed, mutilated, and her left breast amputated. Her body's condition was so horrific, they only managed to identify her through dental records.
In the early 1980s, Chicago was constantly thrown into a state of chaos by the Ripper Crew. The group started out their operations, at least the first murder attributed to the Ripper Crew in 1981. It so happened that on a Saturday, while Linda Sutton was taking in fresh air and walking by a motel in Chicago, she was flagged down by the Ripper Crew. Probably they assumed she was a prostitute who didn't agree to their advances, and so they switched up on her. The details are not clear, but what was certain was that Linda Sutton's body was discovered a day later in a field near the Villa Park Motel in DuPage County, Illinois, about a week after she had disappeared. Due to the advanced decomposition, it was difficult for investigators to determine details of the crime immediately. However, evidence of torture and mutilation made it clear that her murder was particularly gruesome. Linda Sutton was brutalized and mutilated, with one of the most disturbing aspects being the removal of her left breast, something that later became a signature of the group. At the time, police had no idea they were dealing with a serial killing group. It wasn't until the Ripper crew was caught the next year that authorities were able to connect Sutton's murder to them. Her death marked the beginning of a series of brutal killings that would claim at least 18 lives, primarily targeting women. The group then developed a pattern of picking up women, torturing them, and ultimately killing them in ritualistic manners. The Ripper crew were believed to have engaged in occult-like rituals, allegedly involving necrophilic acts and cannibalistic practices directed by Robin Gecht, who happened to be the group leader and had a twisted fascination with Satanism. Although Robin Gecht was known as the ringleader of the cult, Andrew actively participated in their satanic activities. Andrew was often the one at the driver's seat of the vans used for their operations. He was also involved in luring and abducting their victims. He didn't shy away from participating in the ritualistic torture and mutilation of victims, which often involved extreme physical harm and dismemberment. And as the designated driver of the group, he was well known for his part of dumping their victims' bodies by the roadside after the gruesome rituals to be found by regular pedestrians going about their regular daily activities. At this time, Andrew was just another teenager who had gone the bad path, probably due to the influence of his elder brother Thomas, who was also a part of the crew. He was young, but what he was not was innocent. In fact, Andrew Kokoraleis' role in these atrocities was particularly disturbing. He was convicted for his involvement in the murder of Lorraine Barowski, a 21-year-old woman abducted, tortured, and killed in May 1992.
Lori was reporting to work at Elmhurst Real Estate office, but she would never make it inside the building. As she approached the office, the 21-year-old was dragged into a van. Her high heels and keys would later be found scattered on the sidewalk outside her office.
Lorraine Barowski, known as Lori to friends and family, was a 21-year-old woman working as a secretary at a real estate office in Elmhurst, Illinois. On the morning of 15th May 1982, she left her home and walked to her office, unaware that the Ripper crew was lurking nearby in a van, hunting for their next victim, and she would never be able to go back to work again. Andrew forcibly grabbed her, covering her mouth to muffle her screams, and dragged her into their van, leaving behind her keys, shoes, and makeup case scattered on the pavement, a chilling sign that something was terribly wrong. Andrew and his gang took Lorraine to a secret location where she endured hours of torture. She was sexually assaulted, beaten to pulp, and then mutilated.
Spritzer makes a shocking revelation to police. As part of a bizarre ritual, he and Gecht picked up the women, stabbed them, and then Gecht removed their breasts. The breasts are used in special ceremonies.
They would go up into Robin Gecht's little attic, and they would kneel around the table, and Robin would chant whatever chant he wanted to sort of ritualize the scene, to give it a semi-religious significance.
The most horrifying detail of the Ripper crew's crimes was their ritualistic mutilation where they would cut off the victim's breast, reportedly as part of a satanic ritual. Robin Gecht allegedly kept body parts in a wooden box and performed twisted ceremonies. Lorraine's badly decomposed remains were discovered on October 10, 1982, 5 months later, in a shallow grave near a cemetery in Clarendon Hills, Illinois. While all 4 members of the Ripper crew were responsible, Andrew Kokoraleis was directly implicated in Lorraine Barowski's murder. He was arrested in late 1982, and his confession, along with testimony from his brother Thomas, helped convict him. Evidence presented during his trial detailed his participation in the abduction, the infliction of severe injuries, and the disposal of the victim's body. The gruesome nature of the crimes, characterized by ritualistic elements and extreme sadism, shocked the public and solidified the Ripper crew's place in the True Crime Hall of Fame.
Andrew and Edward were also named in a second indictment covering the murder of Lori. Andrew Kokoraleis was sentenced to death and was executed by lethal injection on March 17, 1999. He would be the last inmate to be executed in Illinois.
Following his arrest, Andrew Kokoraleis faced trial and was convicted of murder in 1987, 5 years after his arrest. The subsequent years were marked by a series of legal battles as his defense team pursued appeals, arguing for clemency and challenging the validity of his conviction. These efforts, however, proved futile. The courts consistently upheld the original sentence, and the appeals were exhausted. In 1999, the then governor George Ryan denied clemency, solidifying Kokoraleis' fate. Following his conviction for the murder of Lorraine Barowski, Andrew Kokoraleis was sentenced to death. His execution became a topic of public debate, with some advocating for justice for the victims, while others opposed the death penalty on moral and ethical grounds. The public and political response to his death sentence was deeply divided. Supporters of capital punishment saw it as a just retribution for his heinous crimes, while opponents argued against the morality and efficacy of state-sanctioned killing. Andrew had committed a capital offense, and when the time for recompense came, it was met with mixed feelings. His case opened up an opportunity for debate on the practicality of the death sentence as a penalty for capital offense. However, despite the noble opportunity that his case presented, Andrew still had to face death first. He died in a way that no one else after him would. He made his mark in history for both the good and the bad. But did the good outweigh and then cleanse the bad he had done? Probably not. He is still remembered as a part of the Ripper's crew. Two truths about his existence coexisting.
Mother said when her daughter went missing that she couldn't sleep. She even went as far as carrying around a white sheet with her everywhere she went.
The final day begins. Kokoraleis awoke on March 17, 1999 at Tams Correctional Center, knowing it would be his final day. He had grown from being the wild teenager who sought adrenaline rush through heinous crimes to a reflective, somber adult. I guess spending your adult years, the time to actually explore real freedom in prison, can do that to a person. As dawn broke, the reality of his impending execution permeated the atmosphere. Prison officials began the procedural preparations, and the mood within the facility grew increasingly tense. They noted that he appeared calm, though reflective. Unlike some death row inmates who exhibit visible distress, Andrew Kokoraleis remained composed, possibly resigned to his fate. He was placed under constant observation, with officers ensuring that protocol was followed and his interactions with prison staff and fellow inmates were kept minimal. The weight of his impending death would have hung heavily, creating an emotional atmosphere marked by a mix of dread and resignation. Even though the crime he was being charged for was committed in group, all the group members did not get the same penalty, some more grace than the others. In fact, Andrew was the only one that got a death sentence among the crew. The so-called ringleader, Robin Gecht, unlike the others, was never convicted of murder due to a lack of direct physical evidence linking him to the cases, and he never confessed to the crimes. However, he was convicted of rape and attempted murder in a separate case. He received 120 years in prison and remains incarcerated till date. What does this say? Although peer pressure can cause you to want to do some things with others, life isn't fair to all, and everyone does not have the same destiny. Andrew, an 18-year-old teenager as at the time the crimes were being committed, was sentenced to death while the ringleader of the group lives till date in a prison. Who says a governor cannot come on seat and grant him amnesty? Nobody knows. But Andrew? He faced death in the face. Religious figures visited him, offering him the opportunity for final prayers and spiritual guidance. The Kokoraleis brothers were raised Orthodox Christians, so Andrew found solace in his faith at his final moment. Meanwhile, preparations for his execution were being finalized, with legal representatives making their last efforts to challenge the execution order. As is customary, Andrew Kokoraleis was offered a last meal. The specifics of his request, though often a matter of public fascination, are less important than the symbolic weight they carry. The ritual of the last meal serves as a final, fleeting moment of humanity before the ultimate act of state-sanctioned death. In the hours leading up to his execution, he met with his legal team one last time. Appeals had been exhausted, and there was no last-minute reprieve from the governor. Corrections officers began the final preparations, ensuring that all procedures were in place for a smooth execution. In those final moments, Andrew's psychological and emotional state would have been a complex interplay of fear and resignation. No one was coming to save him. The end has come. Death has his name written on it. For all the time he acted as the Grim Reaper to all his victims, it was time to walk in their shoes and feel what they felt when they came face to face with death. The thoughts of death cannot be an easy one, so it wasn't a surprise when Andrew had his head down for most part of his last day. The final moments before Andrew Kokoraleis was led to the execution chamber were fraught with tension. His demeanor, his words, and his appearance were being closely observed by those present, including prison officials, witnesses, and media representatives. Many anticipated whether he would express remorse for his actions or maintain his innocence. His final statement, if any, would have been a focal point of public scrutiny. Did he express remorse for his crimes, or did he maintain his innocence? The absence of remorse would likely have intensified the public's sense of justice, while any expression of regret would have added a layer of complexity to his legacy. At approximately 12:15 in the afternoon, officers escorted him to the execution chamber. Witnesses reported that he walked with a steady, emotionless demeanor. Unlike some inmates who struggle or resist, Kokoraleis remained cooperative, possibly accepting his fate. Shortly before his execution, Kokoraleis was allowed to make a final statement. His last words, however, were brief and ambiguous, leaving room for interpretation. At 12:30 in the afternoon, Andrew Kokoraleis was strapped to the gurney, and the lethal injection process began. The first drug administered rendered him unconscious, followed by the final drugs that stopped his heart. Within minutes, he was pronounced dead. The execution process, typically brief, is a series of chemical injections designed to induce unconsciousness, paralysis, and cardiac arrest. Witnesses included family members of victims, legal representatives, and journalists. Families of the victims, who had endured years of pain and suffering, likely felt a sense of closure, though the emotional scars would remain. Media representatives documented the event, capturing the somber atmosphere and the procedural details. Legal representatives observed the execution, ensuring that the process adhered to legal protocols. The official time of death was recorded, marking the end of one of Illinois' most infamous criminals. Andrew Kokoraleis' execution had a lasting impact on Illinois. While some felt justice had been served, the case contributed to the growing debate on capital punishment. Supporters of capital punishment viewed it as a necessary act of justice, a fitting end for a man who had committed unspeakable crimes. Opponents, however, decried it as a barbaric practice, a violation of human rights that offered no true resolution. The legal implications in Illinois were significant, as Andrew Kokoraleis' case became a key reference point in the ongoing debate that eventually led to the abolition of the death penalty in the state in 2011. 2 years after Andrew's execution, Governor George Ryan declared a moratorium on executions, citing concerns over wrongful convictions and ethical implications, and by 2011, Illinois had officially abolished the death penalty. For the victims' families, Andrew Kokoraleis' death brought a sense of closure, but did not erase the pain of their loss. The horrors inflicted by the Ripper crew remain a dark chapter in Chicago's history, with survivors and advocates continuing to share their stories. The execution of Andrew Kokoraleis marked the end of an era for Illinois death penalty. His final 24 hours highlight the weight of justice, the emotions surrounding capital punishment, and the lingering impact of his crimes. As debates over the death penalty persist, his case remains a crucial example in discussions about justice, retribution, and the morality of state-sanctioned execution.